Today we're going to paint something shiny and sweet, and I'm going to talk us through it, so let's get started. All right, here's a Lindor truffle, something I love to eat around this time of year. This is the milk chocolate one. They're all delicious. But we're going to get started, and this is very similar to painting the portraits that I've been painting. I thought to myself, well, you're just painting a portrait of a candy, that's all. It's no different than a face. But I don't like to use any kind of whiteout or masking fluid because I get really messy with it. So what I'm doing is I'm putting in those light yellows that I know I'm going to need to preserve. And also just being mindful that there are some whites that I know I don't want to go anywhere near. I'm not blocking them out in any way. I'm just sort of aware of them in my head. The yellow that I'm using is a cadmium yellow. And so it's kind of weird the way I work because I'm working from my lightest lights. I'm going to keep my whites white, and then I'm using this bright yellow. And now I'm going to work with my dark. So I'm working on that dark side of the truffle, which is the left-hand side. Now I don't want to go all the way into purple, so I mix some alizarin crimson with a little bit of ultramarine blue, knowing that I'm probably going to have to go darker later. But for right now, it's going to read as a red. And when I look at the photograph, and again, I'm not matching to the photograph, I'm matching value, not color. I know that if I went as far as a deep purple or into any kind of indigo at this point, would make things too too dramatic when I start to go to the light side of the truffle. I want to make the transition from darks to lights as gradual as I can. That's going to help with softness on the eyes. It's going to create some softness in the edges, and it's also going to create a warmth. So I'm mindful of that. All right, so the darks are in, and now this is probably alizarin crimson almost completely on its own, and that is my darkest red. So I feel pretty comfortable looking at that truffle, squinting my eyes, and finding the dark shapes. And these are not the darkest shapes. Now I'm working into midtones. Most of this truffle is a midtone, not a dark and not a light. So that's kind of the challenge going on here, creating all these different midtones that will read as different shapes, but will come together to the eye. And that's a challenge when you're doing a rose as well, you know, or any kind of a red flower. You have the exact same problem. All the problems are the same. It's just the shapes that are different. All right, moving across the truffle, and I brought in a lighter red here. A lighter red in this case would be, oh, it just escaped my mind. It'll come to me in a minute. Cadmium red, which has an awful lot of orange in it. So I'm not feeling very confident in this color at this moment, but I'm putting it in thickly because I know I can go over it later with a darker red if I want to. That alizarin, which is a transparent color, will go over the cadmium nicely. So I'm keeping that in mind. And mostly what I want to do here is not use a lot of water. I really want to keep the strength of the color up. Because if I start using water to get to the value that I want to get to, things are going to start to look kind of washed out and not robust. So I want to change value using color, not using water in order to get to the value that I want to get to. That's definitely what I want to do with the red shapes. Now when it comes to the whiter shapes, which is the wrapper, then I'm going to have to use some watery washes to get there. But that's later. All right, so I'm constantly looking at the shape. And then I also have to remember, for some silly reason, just because I was feeling goofy, I put I put some tin foil. I put the truffle on top of a tin foil just to make things harder. I don't know if it's harder or what I was thinking. I just was thinking because you know, December gets so dark. I was thinking, how can I make things as bright as it's possible to be? And so I stuck tin foil under this already shiny object. I'm very impulsive. You know, I get an idea in my head and then I don't ask why. I just keep going forward, you know, living forward. That's kind of what I try to do. And besides, it's only paint. I mean, the worst thing that was going to happen here is that I was going to have to either change my mind and paint it again. I don't know. I just figure if you're going to paint, why not make it as interesting as possible? All right, I'm beefing up that yellow because as the red started to go in, you know, every time you start adding a new color to something that you're doing, the context changes. And so the yellows that look so bright when they were against the white piece of paper started to look pretty faded out. And I thought, well, I better get on that. So still being really mindful, knowing that I'm going to have to get to leave the whites of the truffle white. However, if you notice on the left-hand side of the truffle, there are some white shapes, but it's always important to remember that they're in shadow, and anything in shadow I can't leave white. You can leave what's really in the light will remain white, but whatever's in shadow, even if the color itself is white, I'm going to have to adjust that. Otherwise, there's just going to be this weird cognitive dissonance in the head. It just, in your head, you know, you just kind of go, well, that white couldn't be as white. No white can be as white in the shade as it is in the sunlight, even though the color is white. That's I know there are easier ways to explain that, but in other words, even a white ball can look black even in the shade, even though the what they call local color is white. So color is only relative according to how it presents itself in the context. That's what I'm trying to say. Oh, so meanwhile, I've gotten into the wrapper. Now the wrapper, what I'm using for the wrapper, and I mean by the wrapper the cellophane, is I'm using ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and some Naples yellow in order to make some of those folds. I don't like to get too precious making every single fold. That's just not the kind of painter that I am, but I'm looking for general shapes. Oh, and those are thinner washes than what I used in the truffle. All right, so things are starting to shape up a little bit. And then I'm realizing, well, don't forget that there's shapes underneath that truffle too, because you were feeling goofy and decided to put it on a piece of tin foil. So I'm going to have to take care of that. But I do want that to be more faded out than the actual truffle itself. Now, any place that I can see to put a color spot of value, I'll put in, like that spot of red at the very bottom. You know, that gets put in because I can see it with my naked eye when I squint, and I just want to dab it in there. Never rubbing. You know, if I was to rub any of this work, this triad work that I'm doing, these three colors, I would end up with an overall gray, and it would be a pretty gray. It would be a pleasing gray, but in the end, it makes your painting pretty uninteresting. Although it would match the photograph exactly, but that's not my goal. All right, there's where I took care of the whites that were on the shady side of the truffle. You saw me get rid of them with a little bit of that ultramarine bluish mix. Now I'm almost using only three colors for the most part in this painting, which is alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and Naples yellow. I did use some cadmium red and some cadmium yellow, and that's it. And all the mixes that I do come from those colors. And if you keep your palette kind of limited in that way, I find that overall colors go together better because they've been all mixed from their own selves in a way. They've already been introduced, they know each other, nothing sticks out like a sore thumb. So it would be a real mistake, in other words, to bring in a color right now that I haven't introduced up until now. If I was, for example, to bring some cerulean blue to this party, it's going to look weird. It's just too late in the painting to bring a cerulean blue in. Although I considered using it as the background, and then I decided that I didn't want to get involved with the background at all. I may change my mind about that later. All right, everything's been dried, and now I'm going to adjust. Now I'm all the way back, rewind all the way back in a way to the very beginning of the painting where those darkest darks were. And I'm putting those in. So there's quite a bit of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson going on in those shapes. And that's what will actually make a shape look, or something look a little bit shinier. When you have a big, big leap from your darks to your lights, things tend to have sort of a glisten or a shine to them, which is different when things are sort of the overall tonal. So let's see. I think I'm just standing back from the painting now and taking a look at it and trying to decide if there's something I want to do. And I think there is. I just can't remember what I did. But let's see what happens here. All right, just putting in, these are what I would call finishing touches. Just looking back, making sure that it didn't leave any important shape unattended to. Beefing up any colors that I think are starting to look already washed out. And you'll find that with reds. You know, you put the red in and it looks so bright, and then you come back later and it can be faded away. So in a sense, you have to overcompensate for that. Make things brighter than you think they are, because it's going to fade. It'll even fade like a couple of hours from now. It'll look different. All right, so that is my Lindt Truffle, and talking you through how I did mine, and now you can find one, and before you eat it, paint it up. Remember to keep the whites of your paper white, your paints wet, pass for value, mix for color, and please join my YouTube channel, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.